A couple of months ago I had a big clear out of my bookshelves and managed to clear out over 100 books, but because I've been so busy these last couple of months I haven't actually got around taking them to the charity shops yet. So today I decided to do a book unhaul. Here we go. Hi everybody, it's Lily here. So yeah, I've got a lot of books. There are about 120 odd of them, and obviously I'm not gonna show you them all, but I decided to pick out a few. There were a lot of books in there that honestly I hadn't even read, but they were books that I bought like a long time ago when I was kind of early teens, and they're not really the kind of books that I want to read now, so I was harsh and decided to clear them all out. But today I'm just going to talk about the ones that I have actually read and or at least tried to read. So here we go. So the first book I'm unhauling is Me and Mr. Darcy by Alexandra Potter. Now I bought this because the first book, her first book, I think it was the first book anyway, Be Careful What You Wish For, I really enjoyed. It was fun, it was light, it was harmless, and it was just entertaining. This one I didn't enjoy so much. Basically it's about this woman who is very similar if you've seen the film Austenland or the TV series Lost in Austin. It's kind of an amalgamation of the two. It's basically about this woman who goes and stays in this country house, stately home in the middle of England, and somehow she finds herself face to face with the real Mr. Darcy, not just a guy pretending to be Mr. Darcy, and it just didn't work for me. I thought the idea was cute and I thought it would just be fun and easy to read, but it just didn't really go anywhere. And like the TV series Lost in Austin, which for those of you who don't know is basically about this woman who she basically changes places with Lizzie Bennet and ends up living in Pride and Prejudice land. And I had a bit of an issues with that because it just felt a bit strange. This is set in modern day, but Mr. Darcy's in it, so it's a bit weird, but it just didn't work for me, so I'm unhauling that. Staying on the Austen theme, the next book I'm unhauling is Mr. Darcy's Diary by Amanda Grange. This is basically Pride and Prejudice from the point of view of Mr. Darcy. It's all written first person because it is meant to be his diary, and I just didn't get into it. I think the difficulty with this one was that she didn't, for me, really capture the character's voice. It just didn't fit with the era. I've mentioned recently how much I love the Shades of Milk and Honey series by Mary Robinette Kowal, and the reason I love that is because the writing is so reminiscent of Austen. This, obviously it's a diary, so it's going to be slightly different, but it's just too modern, and it just doesn't work. I think it's one of those things where there's a reason why Pride and Prejudice is written from Lizzie's point of view, because it just doesn't work from Darcy's point of view. So yeah, I'm unhauling that. Sticking with a similar era, albeit about 40 decades later, I am unhauling both Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte and Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Now the reason for this is because I just didn't get on with them. I'll put my hands up and say I did read Jane Eyre in school, and often I think when you read books in school it does result in you not enjoying the book, but I just didn't like the character of Jane, I didn't like Rochester, and in general it just wasn't a book I enjoyed reading. It's well written, and obviously in terms of Gothic literature I think the writing's great, but the story and the characters just didn't grab me enough. With Wuthering Heights I just didn't really get into it at all. I didn't like Heathcliff or Catherine, and again it's obviously a very similar style as Jane Eyre, that whole Gothic fiction, and although I do love a lot of Gothic fiction, with this kind of era I just didn't enjoy it, and it just felt really dull and drab and depressing, honestly, so I'm unhauling both of those. Skipping forward a few centuries, there were a lot of books in this pile that obviously I've had since I was quite young, so a lot of them I'm just getting rid of because I read them when I was young and I enjoyed them, but I'm a lot older. One of those series, I'm not going to show you them all because there are a lot, one of those series was the Stormbreaker series by Anthony Horowitz. This was a series which I read, I think, all of them except one. I don't know why, I think I just got to that point where I just stopped reading it, and there were quite a lot of them, so I just never got around to finishing them. For those of you who don't know, it's basically about this kid who becomes a spy for the state after his uncle is killed. Basically. It's kind of a young version of James Bond, in a way. And it was entertaining enough. You know, it was well written, it was enjoyable, the stories were light-hearted and fun and action-packed, but, you know, they're the kind of thing that you read when you're younger but you don't really read when you're older, so I'm unhauling all of those. There's about 6 of them, so that cleared up a huge space on my bookshelf, which was lovely. But yeah, they're all going. A book which I was toing and froing over keeping, and in the end I just decided I wasn't going to read it again, was Girls in Love by Jacqueline Wilson. There was actually another one of her books that I decided to clear out. I think it was Dustbin Baby. I read a lot of her books when I was younger. She was, you know, massive in the 90s when I was growing up, and things like The Illustrated Mum I absolutely loved. I read all the girls series, but I didn't really enjoy them as much. Maybe I was just too old, and it was interesting because it was kind of like I was starting to read like adult chick lit, but I didn't want to read child chick lit, basically. So I didn't enjoy these as much as some of her other books, but they were still, you know, she's still, I think, one of the best children's writers that we have in this country, and she writes so many great books that have characters which are believable and real and you can relate to when you're that age. So they were fantastic when I was growing up, but obviously I'm not going to read them again, so reluctantly I am unhauling this. Similar to Girls in Love in that I read it when I was younger and enjoyed it, but I'm not going to read it again, I'm unhauling the Twilight series. I was quite late to this series because I went to an all-girls school and pretty much everyone was reading it, but it was a series which I just didn't really hear about, and then everyone was talking about it, so I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. When I was a teenager, it was, you know, alright. I don't think it teaches a great message, honestly, and looking back I can definitely see that, but at the time I didn't really, and I think there's an issue there with that. But yeah, they're going. Another series which I think I've mentioned, I didn't really get into it, that was The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I started reading this before the first film came out because obviously everyone was going on about it, and I thought, oh, I'll give it a go before I see the film. I just didn't get into it. It was the writing style for me. I just didn't enjoy the writing style. I love the films and I think they're great stories. They're, you know, they're action-packed and they're fun and enjoyable and all that jazz, but I just didn't get on with reading it. I don't know what it was, it just jarred with me a bit, so maybe I didn't give it enough of a try, but I'm not really willing to give it enough of a try because I love the films, but they're not the kind of films that I really feel like I will get a lot out of reading the books as well on top of that, so yeah, they're going. The final 2 books are actually a couple of books which I loved when I was younger and I thought about keeping, and in the end I decided they were taking up space. So these are actually the Magical World series by David Colbert. These aren't actually fiction books, they're basically about books. So I've got the Lord of the Rings ones and the Harry Potter one. It's basically mythology and stuff. It's talking about the inspiration for the books, where that came from and all that jazz, so it's really interesting. I find that stuff really intriguing, and reading about, you know, what inspired certain scenes and elements from the book is really interesting, and these books are really good if you're kind of really geeky like I am and was. They're really good for kind of learning all that stuff, and particularly with Lord of the Rings, obviously there's quite a lot of inspirations from Arthurian legend and from things like Beowulf and stuff, so it's they're really interesting books, but you know, they're just filling up space, and realistically I'm not going to read them again, so they're going. So those are just a handful of books I'm unhauling. I did go through like all 100 or so of the books, and there were honestly, as I say, a lot of books I just hadn't read, and there were a lot of other books which I read when I was really young, so I wouldn't recommend reading now even though I enjoyed them. And it's interesting actually when you go to like do a bookshelf unhaul, and I kind of have been thinking about doing another one really recently because my bookshelves are getting filled up again already. I had a bit of a book splurge back in August and September, so they're already filling up, and thinking about unhauling a few because I've read a few this year that I haven't really enjoyed. But the great thing about book unhauls, I think, is that particularly for me, I hadn't cleared out my bookshelf in like a decade or so, so there was a lot of stuff that was just things I read when I was a teenager, and it's really interesting to see how your tastes change. Like obviously I went through a whole phase when I was a teenager where I read a lot of chick lit and I didn't read much else. Nowadays I barely ever read chick lit. Maybe I overdid it when I was a teenager or what it was, I don't know, but it's interesting to see how your tastes change as you're growing up. And it's weird because I think I read better books before I went through my chick lit phase than I did during it, so I've kind of thankfully found my way back. But not to bash chick lit. If you enjoy chick lit, that's great. If it's, you know, that's your prerogative. It's just not my kind of thing. But yeah, anyway, that is it for today's video. I'll be back tomorrow with another video, but until then, bye.